We're up.
Yeah, you don't get that much later.
Really?
Yeah.
What do you get up there? You gotta remember, for what you get. I live like 7 miles west of Traverse City, so I'm like nowhere near.
Awesome. We are up and running. Great. All right, good news. So I'm going to start off with a disclaimer. This information is obviously for informational and educational purposes only. So I'm actually going to start off. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to ping the FBI.gov. I'm going to try. Yeah, Fbi.gov. So you can see they have a 104 IPv4 address that's coming back, and if we looked into whereabouts this IP address belongs to, we'd find it's Cloudflare. So the FBI uses Cloudflare, and it works quite well. It is a great proxy of sorts. So anytime that you, for example, go and you ping an IP, or not ping an IP, let's say that you do a DNS request for someone's domain name. So you can pull up someone's IP address. If someone owns that network or they have multiple machines on that network, you can kind of pull through various IPs and keep going to the next server and the next server. That makes it a lot easier for an attacker because now you just get one IP address resolved off that domain, and you can guess that you just keep going to the next IP in sequence and keep pulling through each and every system belonging to a potential victim. So that's obviously not super great because as you're trying to defend from an attacker, you don't want every single server that you have public facing all stacked back to back. You only necessarily want your host names that you want publicly accessible to be able to be navigated to. So in addition to that information, I'd also like to mention that Cloudflare is entirely free. So they have a totally free plan. You can easily push all your web visitors through Cloudflare, and there's SSL support for free also. So it's not terrible, especially since they work as a content distribution network. So you can easily get your access to your website routed through a bunch of different parts of the globe a lot faster than, for example, if you just have one server in Chicago. Like, let's say someone's trying to load your site in the United Kingdom out of Chicago, it's probably going to actually load faster through Cloudflare because Cloudflare has all of their networks all mapped out together to give you the fastest load. Now, the awesome thing about Cloudflare also is that enabling it is literally just clicking a button inside of their control panel after you point through their DNS or you set your NS records over to them. So for example, let's say that I have my domain. I can easily just set in here an A record, and then I can click a little Cloudflare icon. That's going to put me through their HTTP proxy. So turning it on, turning it off, it's a click of a button. That I don't know anything that's simpler in terms of turning a proxy on and off other than this. I mean, it's pretty amazing. And when I say that, I'm talking for free. There's definitely some enterprise functionality and enterprise solutions where you can go out and get a proxy configured where it's just a checkbox on and off. But in terms of being freely available to the public, for example, various government systems, I'd expect that with the FBI using Cloudflare and the other government systems having free access to this type of stuff, I'm honestly surprised that we don't see a lot more of Cloudflare usage within other parts of the government in the United States. So I'm hoping to see a lot more of that because there's, for example, free tools like Census and quite a few other ones, but pretty much my understanding is that they use something, for example, Zmap and Zgrab. They're able to scan through all of IPv4 within an hour if you're just checking one port. And that's pretty lightning quick, like very fast speed there. So the idea, I guess, is that you can pull up, let's just use myottawa.org as an example. So that's one of the local county government websites. And we can see they definitely do not use Cloudflare because we're looking at a bunch of different Ottawa County servers, and I've actually sent them a message saying like, hey, you guys realize that you could use something like Cloudflare, and they don't seem interested, and that's okay. But anyways, what this would allow for is anybody could simply do this to any sort of a potential victim and just pull up all your servers, like I mentioned earlier, and you can see if someone has like a VPN public facing, it gives you potential way to target someone for a phishing attack. So go in here for an attacker and then scraping various web pages with phishing frameworks. Not difficult stuff. It's very simplistic. And I think a lot of times we see like news stories about hackers breaking stuff and getting into things and carrying out these highly sophisticated and complex attacks. In reality, a great majority of the time, they're not that complex. They're not that hard. They're not difficult. Anybody that has a little bit of extra time each day that's able to dig through computer systems and mess around with programming, this stuff is not difficult at all. And I think a lot of it comes down to misconfigurations and also people just not caring until it's too late. Overall, the security standpoint on a global scale, I would say, is more focused on being reactive, and we're not really scared until the dog is biting us in the arm and we see blood. So that's, I think that's kind of a good overall view of what cybersecurity looks like everywhere. And really, that's just not a good approach. So I think that there's definitely a lot more focus on, for example, lately privacy, and we're seeing more acts being passed. And I think that's ultimately what it's going to come down to is people focusing more on how we can make people be safe and kind of like force people to follow certain standards and protocols versus just expecting them to do the right thing and them actually doing it, because that's pretty wishful to just think everybody's going to do the right things. Another cool thing is that, let's say that I've got my website over here. If your website, for example, gets attacked or targeted for some reason and your website goes offline, for free, you can enable an I'm under attack mode. And that essentially makes the person that's loading your site wait about 5 seconds, and it tries to the best of its ability to filter through potential attack bots. So let's say someone's doing a real basic layer 7 attack on your site. It can, to some extent, mitigate that layer 7 attack, whereas you should also be configuring your server itself to be layer 7 protected, so that someone can't just layer 7 attack your site anyway. But I mean, if someone pipes enough bandwidth to your server, it's a rough day. I mean, we know the science behind piping enough data down a channel, and if someone gets your IP and they want to take you out, that's Cloudflare's got a lot of access to bandwidth. So I would say that overall, Cloudflare's network is probably quite a bit stronger than your average just random government building, like a county government building. So I know that they have access to quite strong lines also, but sometimes they base some of their infrastructure off old middle schools or old high schools that their networks haven't really been optimized for some time. And if someone really wanted to attack or shut down a government type of website, I don't think that, in most cases, it would be incredibly difficult. And I think that, unfortunately, part of that is just because there's just never been so much focus necessarily on website security on a large scale. And of course, the FBI, they've had their stuff compromised before, and they probably don't like me saying that, but unfortunately, a lot of times we have to learn, and then we learn from the mistakes, and then we fix them after the fact. And kind of like I mentioned earlier, that's the scenario where someone's getting bit in the arm, so now we're deciding to take security seriously because we're getting attacked there. But anyways, I also wanted to highlight that with Cloudflare, you can force redirects. So I could, for example, if I wanted to, I could forcefully upgrade my HTTPS, or I could make people go from HTTP to my secure channel. And you can also enable HSTS. So that's going to force the browser, the next time it loads your site, to only try your HTTPS secure communications for web traffic anyway. And that's flipping a switch. So otherwise, you have to have a web admin go into some Apache configs or Nginx configs and start throwing in configurations. For some people, they just don't have the resources or the individuals to go into these configs. So pointing an NS record and then having someone click a box, that is way easier in my opinion. So I'd say it's easier to get this type of security out there. And when it starts at the price of free and it works its way up, I mean, the amount of time and just energy behind Cloudflare saving you from going into configs and really doing these more manual tasks of locking HSTS down and doing all your other type of headers. It's ultimately just a lot easier through this. So let's say that you get everything locked down. You have Cloudflare protecting your website. If someone pings it, they're going to get a 104 address typically. That's going to, of course, hide your IP for your web server. And how I think a lot of people mess that up and how a lot of people get kind of sidestepped from their Cloudflare is they set up a lot of domains, or subdomains, I should say. So let's say that I set up smtp.thedomain.com. Well, if I set that up and then, for example, someone pings that, they get that IP address, they load that, and then they load the next IP in sequence or previous, and they see my same website, oh, hey, we know the exact server past your Cloudflare. So people set up subdomains not through Cloudflare's HTTP proxy, and now you're kind of back to square one, assuming that you don't vhost things properly. And of course, that goes back to web configs. A lot of people, when they set up web servers, I've noticed they just kind of leave them default. That's kind of a pain because that's a misconfig, I would say, by not setting up a vhost, because I mean, now you're just making yourself more vulnerable than you need to. In addition, the whole issue with not setting up a vhost is that, let's say that one of those scanners that I was talking about earlier, like Census, or anybody running Zmap and then Zgrab also, they can pull your domain right out of the SSL cert. So, I mean, even if you have things so that the website doesn't load and they can't tell, because it's not going through, even if you just have your SSL cert exposed, now that IP address along with that SSL cert is going to pull back your domain. So people can essentially, go from your SSL cert back to your domain and know that that's the IP address that they could potentially want to attack, whether that's through a lot of people call them booters, or they craft their own DDoS attack, have their own channels of attack. I don't want to talk too much about crazy things, but it's incredibly simple, I think, for people to go from a domain straight into your whole list of all your external facing IPs. And that's, I think, just kind of, it's a little bit silly, I think, because a lot of these places even take the time to set up like a WAF, a web app firewall. And so you have a web app firewall, but that doesn't necessarily protect you in terms of your balancing. And it also doesn't necessarily make the whole configurations in terms of getting all your web servers optimized to be delivering a secure visit for your customer's experience. It just doesn't make it simple. And I think a lot of people get annoyed with security because sometimes it means doing extra configuring or just doing all these extra steps. And I think that there's more software and more solutions that we'll see more like Cloudflare that takes security kind of up to the next level without making it difficult or without making it to where your web admin now needs to go take a whole entire configuration class. So by skipping the whole, my web admin needs to take additional web security training, I think that just makes organizations a lot safer. But even if you do have your website through Cloudflare, let's say that someone generates an email that comes from your website. So I type into a contact form and I want this web server to contact me. Well, anytime that you have any sort of inputs or outputs, inbound, outbound traffic, you have to know what's going on, like every single piece of data, because every bit of data counts, and if someone requests my web server to contact back to them via email, inside of the headers, my server's IP address is going to show up. So that of course defeats the whole purpose of even setting up Cloudflare with the HTTP proxy to get my IP off, kind of out of sight of a potential attacker. So what you do for that is you could set up a postfix relay. So you just set up an internet relay postfix, and now we're going to use a postfix relay to deliver our emails. Only problem with that is that by default, and like for example, even if we set up Gmail SMTP, it's going to have my origin IP address from my server. So just using SMTP through Google, that's not going to work. It's still going to have my web server's IP. Having postfix internet SMTP, that's still going to have the origin IP. In order to get that origin IP out, in order to keep your IP safe from a potential attacker, you need to be using some of postfix regular expression functionality, and in order to do that, they have header checks. So you're able to basically scan through and strip out, while you're sending mail, that origin IP address. So now that keeps your web server's IP out of your emails going to people. So ultimately, I think overall with web privacy, people look at IP addresses just like their phone numbers to throw around and hand out to anyone. But we know what happens when too many people get our phone number. We get a bunch of spam calls, telemarketers calling us. Well, same sort of idea, I think, with IPs. The more popular your IP gets, the more visitors you're going to get, more spam bots, traffic, and just essentially you're just going to get more trash coming into your IP. And because I would say, I think last time I checked, about half of the internet's bandwidth used for web traffic is bots. That's the last thing you want, is just getting a lot more of those bots to you, because they're going to start scanning all your servers, grabbing out different information, and pull out headers to potentially use to attack you. Because unfortunately, nowadays, there's, I think, a lot of free open source tools that make a hacker's job a lot simpler than, in maybe, let's say 10 years ago. So right now, it kind of looks like if someone doesn't patch their system for even 2 weeks, someone could map out, grab various ports, and as long as the attacker knows what port they're attacking, they can scan all those, grab it, and exploit your system. So it's definitely pretty fast, and it's a little bit scary. So I think what it really comes down to is keeping yourself safe behind a nice overall web app firewall system, and also having some sort of a gateway that positions you away from directly being hit by the target. So there needs to be a layer or a shield in between the website or the infrastructure systems and the actual visitor. Otherwise, you're just having someone directly go straight to one main system. Like maybe you have your own load balancer. So what if someone hits your main load balancer or finds a way to break that? That it can be like a full-time job, I think, to maintain a load balancer. So when you have a free service that all they do is load balancing, I think it makes things quite a bit safer than not load balancing out through a service. So I know that there's a lot of other ones. I just wanted to kind of cover some free tools, because I know a lot of small businesses, they don't have the resources or the funds to get things set up. And I think overall the process of getting Cloudflare set up, anybody that doesn't even know much about websites, they could set this up within a day, I would say, or less. So being able to do that, of course, you're not going to get all of the web app firewall options and everything in the free edition, but you could always go the open source route, like setting up mod security. And again, though, then we're getting back into the the painful configurations. I mean, if you just go out and you set up mod security for your first time, you're going to be going through some good documentation, eating maybe a bowl of cereal, going through, and I mean, it's not super fun, I think, and it really just it comes down to being safe and being secure, but simply. And I think when you can really nail down things to where it's a secure but simple process to make things, that's where all of the happiness is. And that's where it's kind of like the best of both worlds. So if you can get security simply, I think that's it. I mean, Cloudflare has definitely done a wonderful job, I would say, and I know some people also complain about Cloudflare too, but it's definitely not Cloudflare's job to fully layer 7 protect you. There is some responsibility on the host's end too. So even though you're going to HTTP proxy out traffic, you might still get smashed by a very realistic looking human traffic flood. But then again, that comes back to like rate limiting or just protecting your systems or servers to the best of your ability. But I'd say that ultimately, if you set up Cloudflare, there's a lot less risk going on just because you're proxying all traffic through to your servers. And this is not necessarily, I'm not trying to pitch sales or I'm not trying to get people to use Cloudflare for any financial gain. I don't have a referral code. I think that I've seen a lot of websites, and a lot of the websites that I've seen not using Cloudflare, they've had issues where maybe their whole entire systems have gone offline. And now their systems have gone offline. They have a TTL set for like 24 hours or 48 hours, and that system is just down. Whoops. And so when your system is down and you have a 24-hour TTL and that server's not coming back up, have a happy day because it's not happening. You're going to have a whole entire day of downtime possibly if that server doesn't get back up. And if people thought more in terms of having a backup server, fault tolerance, somewhat redundancy, I think that that's kind of what the focus should be on. And I think it's easier to just kind of visualize everything right inside a simple control panel where you can type in your rules. You can change the TTL at the click of a mouse button, and you can turn off and on that HTTP proxy as you need to. So I think between getting getting everything set up through Cloudflare and just filtering out any sort of IP address, origin IP, you're pretty much the IP privacy there is pretty well locked. I mean, does anybody have any objections to locking your IP down through a proxy and then filtering out your IP any way that it could be going outbound? You can. I'm totally open for any objections to it.
My first question is why when there's other services that do similar denial of service prevention, albeit probably not free. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
I know some are paid, but you can do BGP. That they take over BGP routing for your network.
Yep.
So you keep your range, you manage your range however you want, and they just they're the next hop after your ISP.
Okay.
So you can do denial of service filtering there. You keep your range and really it kind of takes the confusion of that proxy or the map out of it.
Yeah.
Sufficiently large though to.
Yeah, I think that's where I'm thinking that this is probably why that makes sense because.
Yeah. This is more like. This is more you type in the name servers, you click a button. So like that's, well, I get what you're talking about and I agree with you, 100%. I think for like your everyday businessman that is starting up his ma and pa shop, I don't think that's gonna make him happy.
So when you do the HTTP proxy, that's truly doing a layer 7 proxy for web traffic, right?
Yep. Yeah.
So
80.
when you do the redirect through SSL, it's just doing like a layer 4 redirect, or it's just gonna.
Well,
It's no longer gonna proxy the traffic truly.
So there's multiple ways to set up your SSL. You can kind of configure it how you want to. So you can put your own cert in there, or you can have flexible. So depending on those settings, I would assume it redirects the traffic according to how you configure it. So I mean, you can. I don't know if this is good answering your question, but you can have like full end-to-end encryption with this, where Cloudflare doesn't have any of your traffic at all. Or if you wanted, there's a flexible setting where on the server side of things, you would not have to configure SSL. Now, obviously, I don't recommend that. That's not the safest way to do things. But yep, exactly, yes. So with that, I mean, it still offers protection or a secure channel for the visitor, just of course not on the server. Exactly. Yep. So yeah, I think that's like a pretty solid, simple few steps. I mean, I honestly set that up within 30 minutes all around. And I know I didn't really demo like sending out a postfix based SMTP relay, but with that, with the WordPress, I did test it out and it does work. So you can strip out an origin IP address that's being sent over to a postfix relay just using regular expression with header checks. And that just basically have a regular expression that checks anywhere where the origin IP would be, and just that gets taken right out, filtered. That's pretty cool that you can literally just spin up a website, a domain, and then not have your web server's IP anywhere shown for completely free, and being able to set up like in a half hour or less. I don't know of any other super simplistic way to do that for free. Does anyone else know?
Limitations on the free version?
There are some limitations, but the limitations are more like just not having a more advanced web apps security. So you don't have like the web app firewall, all the business bells and whistles. But ultimately, you can have a very lovely free experience with it without losing. Like, for example, they're not going to cap out your bandwidth, to my understanding. I mean, they may have a rule on how much bandwidth you can have, but in my use of Cloudflare for free, you can have a whole bunch of websites. I mean, I've known of friends that have had hundreds of websites in Cloudflare free, and it's still trucking along. They've got many gigs, and there's no issues with them. So I mean, for that, like for free, it's a little amazing that they can offer that. But I think how they do that is because it's free for small businesses and people, they love it so much that they kind of take that into their business with them. So I think Cloudflare has kind of targeted the market where it's, if you want a really nice, expensive enterprise business license, you can have that. And then they let all of their personal and small businesses use it for free because they understand the need for security. I know Cloudflare even has their own DNS, and they have some pretty cool looking numbers too. So if you've ever checked out Cloudflare's IPv4 for their DNS, it's pretty awesome looking. But yeah, does anybody have like any questions at all about hiding your IP? And by the way, when I talk about hiding an IP address, this is definitely not something where oh no, we have to freak out and hide our IP from the government. I'm not one of those tinfoil hat people, but there are really bots out there that will go in and start just Z-mapping across the whole internet, scanning servers for outdated Apache, outdated servers. And this is, I could see how someone could say that this is more like obscurity, and to an extent I could say it allows kind of for you to not be as safe on the actual server side of things. Like for example, the HTTPS without actually having SSL or anything really configured on the server side. If someone's on your same server's network and they're pulling traffic, intercepting, yeah, I mean, that's not cool. But if you set this up properly end to end, how it really should be, I would say that you're fairly well kept safe. I'm not going to promise or make 100% guarantees because I don't want anybody to come after me because they used Cloudflare and it broke. But I'd say just the trade-off of having complete IP privacy with being able to do that for 30 minutes, it's just not difficult. And so I guess what I see is like there's not really much of a reason to not hide your IP when it is so incredibly simple to do that, and it mitigates a lot of, in my opinion, it mitigates a lot of risk. You don't, for example, you don't have your Apache versions leaked out. You're now seeing Nginx from Cloudflare. You're not having a whole bunch of different version numbers leaked out in your headers. So it just, it's simple, and it's click of a button. So I think that's kind of what people think security should be, but they obviously don't want to go into, you know, hundreds of lines of configs and sit there waiting for another package to install and click through a whole bunch of things. Now, I'm not saying I skip around that stuff, because I definitely take my time and I install a bunch of packages and I do configs, but I'm talking more the general public. I think people just like easy, and I think that's why people are so lazy too, is because they like easy and simple. And so when it comes to like leaving an unpatched web server version out there, and then you're faced with a huge data breach, I don't have to say any names, people know. I mean, a bunch of places they have kind of that stuff set up. So I'm not saying this is a replacement for management of patching or anything like that, but just to have like such simple HTTP proxy with a bunch of security features for free, that's a hard price to beat. Does anybody think that that's a scam?
So what about the load balancing side of things? What does it do for, you know, you mentioned load balancing at some point. Like, what if you are a company that has a web server and you're doing mighty well, and you start growing an e-commerce business, and you know, you go from, you want to go 2 to 4 to, you know, scale that up?
Yeah, definitely. So I would say probably if you're more doing like an enterprise package, I think that they definitely offer some more functionality for you. But let's say that, for example, I'm not sure if you're talking about maybe like caching functionality, but you can come in here and you can purge stuff. You can set how you want the caching set up. You can, they have a lot of like performance type stuff. You can automatically minify a bunch of scripts.
Is this all part of the free version?
Yes. Yep. So I mean, you get a bunch of caching options, speed options to minify all your scripts, so it just overall your loads are quicker. Now, obviously, if you have a Holland server and you have a Holland customer, like Michigan, you're going to lose a little bit. You know, there's some latency added, but I mean, for the trade-off, I mean, we're still talking probably not a whole ridiculous amount of milliseconds. I would say it's not going to make your users run away from you. So, I mean, it's at least something I think some places should maybe try out, just even with a test server, and see how it works for them. And if for whatever reason they don't like it, I get that. But I've definitely seen websites where, for example, like I mentioned earlier, they have a silly TTL, and they do that because maybe that's what their DNS is capable of. This is a free DNS, so you can.
Sorry to interrupt, guys.
Yeah.
Students gonna come and pick up some parts?
Yeah, we've got parts. So yeah. Anyways, like they do have like polish and railgun, and they do have different options. Like you upgrade to pro and business, but the free speed optimization and caching, they do have those free features there. So it.
Still like $20 for the next step up, and then 200 beyond that, and then more than that.
I've never looked too much into. Yeah, you're right. Yep. So $20 a month for pro, $200 a month for business, and that's how you know I'm not selling this. I don't even know the prices. Okay. So anyway, I've personally I've used this in combination with a different web app firewall. It's called Securi, and I think Securi, in terms of what they offer for their web app firewall, gives you a lot more bells and whistles than Cloudflare does. So Securi and Cloudflare, they pair quite well together actually, and I'm not positive if they have a partnership, but on Securi's web app firewall, which is like it's a security solution, all web-based, cloud-based. They let you basically put in your Cloudflare server right inside your Securi web app firewall panel. So, and that's all entirely like remote managed. You don't have to set up your own expensive web app firewall hardware. It's a pretty low price, I think, of like 19 bucks a month. So to pay 19 bucks a month to get like a business grade web app firewall, that's it's a pretty good deal, I would say.
What was the name of the firewall?
Securi, it's SUCURI, and I believe that's .net. Let me
Just .ty at the top of the domain.
say again. Yep. So yeah, I've had it before. I've had it before where I've had a few websites of mine attacked pretty hard by some layer 7 attacks. Like, for example, some people would go through different WordPress sites, hack them, and get just, thousands and thousands of shells. I had over 1 million web requests per second on one of my web servers, and I threw security in, and that pretty much automatically blacklists things with their balancer, so in their web app firewall solution. So that's a pretty amazing price for 19 bucks, or $19.99 I think it was when I got it. But that's a pretty solid solution. I mean, you could block 1 million requests per second yourself, but have fun. So yeah, free and 20 bucks a month. Anybody have any questions? Okay. Yeah, and nobody has to buy this. You don't have to buy security. You can just think security just happens too.